Thanks everyone, and welcome again for coming. It's great to see you all here. I bet you've had really busy days. Can you hear me up the back? Oh, that's great, thank you. It's such an exciting time if you're here because you're thinking of, or you're about to send your little ones off into school, perhaps for the first time, or perhaps you're coming to think a little bit differently as a refresher course if you've got somebody starting in your family for the second or third time. In the words of Dr. Seuss, you're off to great places. I believe schools are great places. They're places that have great opportunities. Opportunities for academic learning, opportunities for socialising, opportunities to expand those wonderful life experiences that you give your children in your homes. But it can be a little bit daunting, can't it, thinking about school and navigating school for the first time, especially for little ones. I've been interested in this topic for quite some time now. My background is in primary teaching. I taught kindergarten as part of that for about 9 years. Absolutely loved it, just love those little ones, that age group. But to be honest, at the start of the year, it was often a bit of a circus, and not in a good way. I'm going back to the early 2000s. When we didn't have in place the wonderful transition to school processes that there are now. It was pretty much, come in the year before school, spend a couple of hours, read a story, colour something in, and see you next year. So, over that time, I, had a lot of questions about what we were doing and what was happening and why were some children really thriving on what it was I was doing with them in the classroom and others not so much. What is it that we could have done better? So I decided to look into it, and that looking into it culminated in my PhD research. And so I want to share a little bit of what I found out in that research today, and not just my research, but thinking about the research of others. So let's tell you about what we're going to do. So we're going to, I'm going to share with you some of the things I found out about what makes for a happy and successful start to school for children and their families. A little bit, this presentation is based on research, but we'll have little snippets along the way of what I've gleaned from that, advice from children and some parents who have recently been through that move into big school, and a beautiful teacher, one teacher, Sharon, who's just the best kindergarten teacher you'll ever come across, and she's sharing a little bit of wisdom with us today, so you won't have to listen to my voice the whole time. We're thinking about the concept of readiness. What is readiness? Who has to be ready? And what does it actually mean to be ready? And how play really fits in there and supports children to be ready in lots of ways. Some practical considerations, and I've thrown in some questions that I would ask of my prospective school to find out about the things and the practices that they do, especially at the time of transition. So first of all, I want you to just take a little think back and see if you can dredge up some of those memories. Maybe not from your first day, I certainly can't remember that, but in the first few years of your school. What sorts of memories can you recall? Were they fond memories? Were there some anxious memories there? Because the way you feel about school, your experiences at school, will colour the way that and the expectations that you have for your little ones beginning. So just have a little bit of a chat at the people around you and share some of those memories if you can. Would anyone like to share any of those fond or not so fond memories from their first years at school? Anything that really sticks out in your mind, you think, oh, I'd like to share that?
I don't really have fun memories, but I remember my mum in the hospital, having a baby or something. I can't remember. And my dad sent me to school, but he sent me to school in my normal uniform when it was sports day. And I was just like,
yeah. It's those little things that can really make a difference. And look, you remember that feeling all the way through to today. Amazing, isn't it?
I remember having to line up. There's a lot of lining up.
Oh,
I remember
we
I
love
went to
it.
school with two little friends, so we're three. I'm sure it was the first day of school. My mum was there, and I remember we weren't allowed to stand in a line of three. We had to split up, and one of us go behind. And that was really upsetting. I remember. Yeah, I had to go with two lines of three. I only allowed one friend. It was very sad.
Rules and rules about lining up, rules for everything. And, you know, there's logical reasons for that. Schools are big places and they have to have lots of organisation in place. But again, those little things that you remember today that would have caused some angst at the time. Yes, lots of lining up. If you're as old as me, you might remember doing lots of marching too. That's a bit crazy. Well, thank you. It probably comes as no surprise that I really enjoyed school, particularly the primary years of school. And not for the reasons that you might think. The learning, you know, that was okay. I could do that. I was fairly competent in doing that, but it wasn't what I enjoyed. I enjoyed the social side. Friends in the playground, having a laugh, playing games, going to sport days. On those rare occasions we got outside the school to do something with friends. They're the things that I most remember and value about school. Not so much secondary school, but primary school I remember very fondly. Wanted to be a teacher since I can remember. Testimony to that, I still have friends today that I went to kindergarten with, and we still get together regularly and have lots of laughs. And the research, a lot of research is telling me that children particularly say that friends are the main reason that they enjoy school and have a positive start to school. So you might have fond memories of friends too, even if they're not allowed in the same line as you. I don't know if you're familiar with Finding Nemo, but this is a great little snippet about Nemo's first day at school.
First day of school! Wake up, wake up! Come on, first day of school!
Oh, I don't want to go to school. 5 more minutes.
Not you, Dad, me!
Okay.
Get up,
Huh?
get up! Time for school, time for school, time for school, time for school!
All right, I'm up. It's time for school.
Whoa!
Nemo!
First day of school!
Nemo, don't move! Don't move! You'll never get out of there yourself. I'll do it. All right, where's the brake? You feel a brake? Sometimes you can't tell because fluid is rushing to the area. Now, any rushing fluids? Are you woozy? How many stripes do I have?
I'm fine.
Answer the stripe question.
3.
No! See, something's wrong with you. I have 1, 2, 3. That's all I have? Oh, you're okay. How's the lucky fin?
Lucky.
Let's see. Are you sure you want to go to school this year? Because there's no problem if you don't. You can wait 5 or 6 years.
Come on, Dad, it's time for school.
Forgot to brush.
Oh.
Do you want this anemone to sting you?
Yes.
Brush.
Okay, I'm done.
Up, you missed a spot.
Where?
There. Right there. And here, and here.
So going to school affects more than just the children, doesn't it? Hands up if you're feeling a little bit like Nemo's dad. Yeah, and fair enough too. It's a big step. Some of these traits, I guess, or skills that I've got here on the board are markers of a positive start to school. So when children go to school and in the first few weeks and months and, you know, a bit longer than that, they want to feel valued. They want to feel valued for who they are and what they bring to school. They want to feel suitable, that they actually fit in with their peers around them. They want to experience success. They want to know that when the teacher gives them some activities to do that, you know, yeah, they can do it. They might need a little bit of help, but basically they feel confident in that setting to do what's asked of them. That leads to a positive self-image of them in that setting and a positive self-concept as a learner. We want to develop children to have that positive self-concept right from the start when they get to school. Feel comfortable, feel like they belong in the school setting, feel liked, and having all those feelings, I guess, will set them up for positive expectations of what's to come for their learning journey. So they're the aspirations, I guess, of what we want children to feel when they experience their transition to school. So what does research say? So this is a definition of transition to school from Australian researchers Dockett and Perry. And along with a whole bunch of other research, they're responsible for the way we think about and the way we do transition to school now. And they tell us that it's a period or a process of change, dynamic change, but also continuity. So change is good. Children look forward to change, but we also want to embed some continuity as they move from home and move into schools. It starts well before the first day and extends to maybe well after the first day of school as well, till the children feel comfortable in that surroundings. They feel like they belong. And in particular, to the teachers recognise that feeling of belonging. So gone is that one-off transition or orientation experience, and now we're thinking about that extended period where the schools that you're going to will hopefully offer lots of opportunities for you to engage with their setting in the year before school. Perhaps they go to the early childhood settings as well, and then continue on with that relationship with you in those early days of the first year of school. A whole bunch of people I've got down there that you don't really have to take any notice of, but it just shows you that there's so much research that has found the same thing, what's important for transition. And these are two key areas. The first one is about relationships. So building relationships with children, families, and with the personnel at school, with the teachers, so they can feel that sense of belonging. The second one is about the teachers, really having high expectations of the children, to recognise their strengths and then make connections to those strengths and those funds of knowledge that they bring from home. So even the little person that can write his name and knows the alphabet and can say numbers, recognising those strengths, but also recognising the strengths of the little boy that can't do any of that, but can talk about the wonderful experiences he has at home with his family when they go fishing, or can paint a beautiful picture and talk about that, or basically just sits there with a beautiful smile and can't do much but they're his or her strengths. So it's about having high expectations of all students, and when we do that as teachers, the children feel valued for what they know and what they bring. In order to do that, there has to be lots of communication and sharing. So this is another great aspect of our transition programs today. It's where, again, children enter school with a huge range of different expertise and abilities. So even if they all came in at 5 on their 5th birthday, there would still be a range of interests, a range of knowledge, a range of expertise and skills. And the best learning environments find out about what they are, and they build on and make connections to those, particularly in those first few days of school. And if I can say, in my teaching experience, that was a big thing that was missing. This wasn't recognised when I was teaching back in the early 2000s, that we had this curriculum and the children in my classroom were going to be the best readers and writers that school had ever seen, and we started on day 1, whether they'd picked up a pencil or not. So not surprisingly, some children were not ready for that. Thankfully, I know differently now, and I pass that on to others, but I won't go back and try and fix it up. So early childhood educators share what they know with schools and with families. Families share what they know. They know the most. You know the most about your children, and we need lots of opportunities for that information to be shared with teachers, with all coming together there. This little video here is a really nice little snapshot that encapsulates some of the things that I'm going to be talking about today, and it's based on research as well, and it talks about what makes for a positive start. And this is where I need to click out to YouTube.
Starting school is a big step for you and your child. Children who make a positive start to school are more likely to feel comfortable and develop a sense of belonging to the school community. They're also more likely to feel excited and motivated to learn. Together, children and their families, early childhood education and care services, and schools help children along their journey. Starting and settling into school is not just about the first day. It begins when children and families start to prepare in the year before and continues as children experience their first days, weeks and months of school.
When the buildings do come inside or line up at the door to go outside, they'll get to go to the library and they'll actually get to choose a book. Write my name, do homework, play, going on excursion. There's only one teacher and they don't want to get a headache.
Starting school involves a number of changes for children and their families, and everyone reacts differently to these. The changes that children experience when they begin school relate to the new physical environment, which is often bigger and busier, the new rules and procedures for the school day, the relationships that they'll need to develop with teachers, staff and other children, and of course the new learning experiences that school offers. As a starting point, it can be helpful to think about how your child copes with change and how you've supported them through change before.
You have to wear a special school uniform. You have to wear a school dress if you're a girl. And we need to take a backpack, a store bag, pack my lunchbox with lasagna.
There's a range of skills that your child has been developing that will help them as they settle into school. Some of these areas of development include their social and emotional skills, their independence and their learning skills. Social skills include being able to share and take turns, spending time talking and playing with other children, and understanding how to be a good friend. Being able to manage emotions are important skills for coping with challenges and for getting along with others. A child's independence develops as they're encouraged to do more things for themselves, like getting dressed, packing their bags, making their own decisions. And then there are the learning skills, like being able to listen to a story, stay focused on a task, share ideas with other people, and make choices between activities. These provide the basis from which children learn the more academic skills of reading and writing. Children have different rates of development, and they won't all have these skills when they start school, but they will learn and develop them over time.
Sometimes parents worry that their children should be able to write their name or know the alphabet before they start school. These skills are important, but not all children are ready to do this before they start. Building on a child's skills and strengths helps ensure they're prepared for the changes that school brings. I guess what I tell parents is that school will continue to build these skills. That means emotional skills, social skills, academic and creative skills.
When it was my first day and my dad left, I was a bit sad. And my mum and dad came to school and they dropped me off. I was a bit sad. Sometimes when you're starting, you might feel a bit scared, and I feel like, But I was happy as well to start.
you know, like any parent, on the first day it's quite upsetting seeing your little child and seeing them in their school uniform for the first time in front of the other kids too. It's they actually look so tiny.
I did notice some kids looking a little worried, but I think because most of them had done that transition to school program and the parents had been given literature about how to prepare their kids, I think most kids weren't nervous as such.
What actually happened was that, you know, we took her down there, gave her a quick cuddle, said goodbye, and that's it. She was so excited she just walked off and, you know, we're left standing there going, you know, where do we go now?
Making a positive start to school helps your child to continue to develop their social, emotional, independence and learning skills, which all contribute to your child's mental health and well-being. Children who are mentally healthy are better able to meet life's challenges. They're also better learners and have stronger relationships.
Oops, hang on. Sometimes if I don't close it properly, it starts playing again, so bear with me. Let's move. Okay, so school is different. It was a nice little snapshot of how it's different. The physical environment's very different, the social environment, the academic environment. What we try to do in our transition to school plans and programs is provide that continuity. So some of the learning is similar. Children see familiar faces when they get to school. Try and fix the physical environment. So there's some types of continuity. But basically it is about change, and change is a good thing, and many children are ready to make those changes. Sean talks about his little boy James, who'd been at preschool and was really ready to take on the new learning. He said that James looked forward to the change. He had 2.5 years at preschool and he was realising that he was growing out of that routine and seeing that routine suited the younger children. I mean, he loved preschool and the relationships and the adults there, but I could see he was ready for a change. So little snippets of what children, the differences in children as we go along today. So let's think about the physical environment for a minute. So it's quite huge in comparison, isn't it? Especially when you think about the playground, the outside environment. There's so many children, so many faces, and that teacher-to-child ratio is quite different. So you've got 1 in 10 basically in an early childhood centre, 1 teacher for every 10 children, and then in that playground it might be 1 teacher for 50 or 100 children, depending on the context of the school. And their role is different in the playground. They're not about playing and chatting to the children, but they're about supervising and making sure that everybody's safe. There's much less to entertain the children in the playground, so there might be some play equipment. Perhaps they have to go on that in a rotational basis, so they can't access that at any time. There's not the toys and the games and the sand pit and all those things. There might be little bits, depending on the school context, I guess, but generally there is a lot less to entertain children. So a question that I would have for a school is, how are the children supported in the playground during the first few weeks and months of school? Some schools might have a separate playground for the Kinder 1 and 2. Some might have at the start of school a different time for the kinders to go out and experience the playground. So it's not so daunting and not so crowded. Sometimes the kinder teachers actually go out with the children for those first few weeks and spend the time with them and making sure that they see a familiar face, or they might organise the buddies to come and take them into the playground. So there's lots of things that schools might do to support that. I want you to meet Kate. Kate's daughter Layla started school last year, bright little button, great language, and was one of those kids that just wanted to sit down and flip through books and draw pictures and find out, how do you spell this and how do you spell that. She turned 5 in the January as she started school. So Academically, she seemed very well prepared for school, and something Kate didn't realise was the playground environment. So she shares a bit of that with us here.
Even the littlest things, like, there were 2 girls in grade 1 that were rude to me. Just navigating those sorts of things in the playground with other kids in such a big environment, not just a play date at the park, which we were used to at age 5, was a big factor that she had to get over. And I think being a parent, you just don't know what goes on, and you're used to getting reports from daycare, that tells you every little thing they do, eat, sleep every day. So putting them out there in the playground and not knowing what level of rudeness, somebody might be, and the impact that might be having on them was, just an interesting part of getting into school and settling that I didn't know, would happen. And the way she talked about it, I just felt she felt very overwhelmed being around so many kids. And navigating. And when I thought about it, it was like, well, everyone in that school is wearing the same hat, the same uniform. They're just probably different heights, and how else could you distinguish one kid from the other? So when she's getting to know her classmates, and coming home and saying, I didn't play with anyone because I didn't see anyone I knew, you sort of start to understand why that might be really overwhelming for a 5-year-old, feeling the smallest. And, how do you help them through those sort of feelings?
Video, Kate, I went to her house, and she's a relative of mine, and the garbage truck arrived. Okay. So we moved up the road to her grandmother's house, and then the delivery truck pulled up in the middle of that. So it was like, whatever, I can't do much about that. So that links, all the environments are mixed, I guess. That links to the social environment. So there are so many new faces in the playground, in the classroom, and again, those relationship changes. So no more the teacher and the child relationship. So instead of, oh, hey, Lynn, look at this, it's, excuse me, Mrs. Cronin, it becomes a lot more formalised, and children have to get used to that. There's much less opportunities to talk with the teacher, with peers in the classroom, and less opportunities to play and socialise in the classroom, but also in the breaks. Many early childhood centres, have that indoor-outdoor policy, and children have opportunities to play and talk and whenever they like. And of course, many rules and routines. So I would ask, if it were me, I'd be thinking about what opportunities are available in the classroom for you, the teacher, to get to know the children, and the children to socialise and get to know each other, especially in those first few weeks and months as they settle into school. Kate talks a little bit about how Layla went with that.
In the lead up, I think parents, there's a lot of focus and a lot of talk around, we're going to the interview with the principal, and hope my child does well, and apparently they ask you to count to 30 and write your name, and can your child do that, and can mine do that? Which is all good and well, but I think what I was aware of going into it and solidified once starting is that I think the academic part of learning will come, and that's why you're sending your children to school. And for me, more important is the social skills and the social aspects of school readiness, being ready to fit in a classroom, an individual child being able to feel comfortable around people, problem solve, work with others, ask questions, and that just requires an inner confidence. It doesn't require the ability to write the alphabet, your name, and that was, that's that sort of competitive nature, I think, of school that you get amongst the parent community, which can be overwhelming at times. but social skills are where they survive in the classroom, they survive in the playground, and to me that should be the focus for assessing readiness.
So the academic environment obviously is different. It's school's core business, isn't it, to teach those academic skills. What children find is they have less choice about what activities that they can engage with and less options to engage. Many of the experiences are teacher directed, so there's particular ways of doing those experiences and activities, which is something quite different. Learning can now become right or wrong, which may be a different concept for some children, that there's particular ways of doing things and sometimes you might be doing it not the correct way. The question and answer routine, hand raising, not as much time to have your say, but also sometimes when you do have your say, it may not be the answer that the teacher was looking for. So some of these experiences may be very different from what the children have had before. Learning does look different. It's mostly inside when they're used to a range of places. Now, I'm not saying any of this is negative. Schools operate this way for particular reasons. I'm just saying that these will be changes for children and we have to support them and talk to them about the changes and how they navigate those. What types of experiences happen in the classroom to gradually ease the children into those more formal aspects of learning? For example, how's play infused throughout the day, especially in those early weeks and months? What interest-based activities are provided for children? And teachers will only know that if they have those great communications and relationship building, and it's a great time to be able to do that for teachers and for children and families. You may or may not have heard the Best Start Kindergarten Assessment. Anyone heard of that? Okay, yeah, well you will hear about it. And my advice is to listen to what the school tells you about it, because there can be some contentious issues around this and misinformation that gets passed around about what it's for. So teachers can identify the literacy and numeracy skills that your children bring to school. Remember before I said teachers need to build on their strengths, build on what they know. So this is about building on what they know in literacy and numeracy. It happens right at the start of school, which sometimes people might question about the urgency of that, but it's an assessment that captures what they bring. So I guess that's why it's at the start. And it's a starting point for teachers to use to plan. They plan their more formal learning skills from this. So if your child comes to school and he knows how to count to 5, well, they know that then. They're not going to waste his time teaching him that. But there is absolutely no expectations that the children can do what's on the assessment. But if they can, the teachers need to know about it. So there's no preparing, there's no, we don't want parents to feel anxious about this. It's simply for the teachers to use to plan. It's not a test. So you'll probably hear more about it. Lisa has 2 older children and she has a couple of younger children. And she too has learned a little something about what she valued about preparing her children for school.
So I've got 2 older boys who are now 19 and 20, and when they were little boys before school, I was studying to be a teacher. And I thought that if I had these 2 children that started kindergarten, knowing how to read, knowing how to write, knowing how to count numbers and add and subtract, that I would be considered a super mum. And so I made sure that they could do these things before they started kindergarten. I realised that by the end of kindergarten, all of the other kids had just caught up with them and overtaken in some cases as well. So when it came to my two younger children, who are now year 3 and kindergarten, I took the complete opposite approach, and I let them focus on play and creativity and just growing who they were as a person. And they've both started kindergarten without knowing to read and write. They know some basic counting, some basic sounds, but I've not focused on teaching them any academic skills whatsoever. And they've settled into school really, really confidently and really well.
I don't want you to get the idea that I'm saying don't do academic skills, because there's lots of children out there that are really keen to do that, and well and good, and you support that and you encourage that. But what I'm saying is don't be fazed if they're not interested right at that moment, because when they get to school, the teachers know how to draw them in, how to get them interested, how to build on their interests and get them to settle. So that brings me to ready. What does readiness mean? Is my child ready for all those changes? How do I know? What does it mean to be ready? So traditionally asking that readiness question can put the onus on the child. Are you ready for school? Oh no, she can't do this or that, or maybe not ready yet. And that sort of implies some kind of deficit, doesn't it? That child is something lacking or missing. So when we think holistically about readiness, we try to think about, and there's a nice little formula here that was devised by research, what makes for ready children? Well, having ready families, doing what you're doing here today, coming and thinking about what's important about preparing children for school, but also thinking about how you need to organise yourselves as families to be ready for school. Ready Early Childhood Centres, they do lots of planning and organising and providing experiences and support for the children and families, so they need to be ready. Ready communities. Communities provide often community experiences for transition to school. They also, in the community, there's supports for children who are, or families from different cultural backgrounds, or from children that need particular health, with children with additional needs, or families that require health services. So the communities have to be there ready with support for children and families that need it. And of course schools have to be ready, and one of my favourite quotes from research is, it's not about children being ready for school, but schools being ready for children. And that harks back to that research again, doesn't it? Schools need to be ready for whoever walks in that door. They're entitled to go to school when if they turn 5 by the right date, and they need to be ready to support them. And that's my take on readiness anyway, but, not my take really, that's from research, but there's 5 dimensions that have been identified to support children's readiness themselves. So children's development is influenced more than by age or by gender. There's no magic age that ensures readiness. But there's generalisations that can be made. Young children tend not to have the same types of skills developed as older children, but that's not always the case. So the idea is to really focus on the individual and the individual's context, their family context, to see if going to school is the best thing for them and their families, and what that means. So ways to support children's transition: physical and wellbeing and motor development, social and emotional, approaches to learning. How curious are they? Are they excited about learning? And do they want to find about new things? How's their language? Because language is a really important factor, being able to communicate and be able to understand language. And of course, cognition and general knowledge. How do they think and work things out? And what sorts of things do they know about the world? All those areas support children to prepare for school. So being physically fit and strong is a really important factor. The first dot point there is about children having the strength, or the core strength, to be able to sit for periods of time at school and to listen. And if you can't sit and listen at school, then learning is going to be a bit more challenging. confidence. It gives children confidence to interact in the environment, particularly the outdoor environment. It helps them build those fine motor skills. Of course, nutritional foods give them that energy and supports the social interactions in the playground. It gives them social capital, doesn't it? Like if you can participate competently in a game, then you're more likely to be asked to play and enjoy those social settings in school. I think ball games are key, like it's just to be able to catch and throw and kick a ball really lets you to be part of many of those physical experiences at school. Running games, chasing, tip, balance games, particularly for core strength, jumping, hopping, climbing, just the more experiences they can have helps them prepare for school in many ways. I always used to get a little bit sad when I'd get a little kinder student and they couldn't catch the ball. I don't know if that was me being irrational, but it just used to make me feel a bit down. Such a sort of, not a simple skill, but one when practiced, it's great for their hand-eye coordination for learning in general. Something that you might ask the school is to think about their policy about play equipment from home, what the school provides for them to engage with in terms of games and play in the classroom. And of course this one is a big one, isn't it? To be able to form and sustain positive relationships with teachers and with peers. And I've really highlighted that word cooperating, because cooperation is something that we do in schools all the time. We want children to share, to learn together, to work in groups. And by the way, nobody's going to school with all these things in place. This is not a checklist, tick, tick, they're ready. These skills your children have been developing since they were born, and they will continue to develop them. That's beautiful, isn't it? This is beautiful Sharon, the kindest, sweetest, gentlest kindergarten teacher, but don't be fooled, she's very knowledgeable. She talks a little bit about children that did not have these skills when they came to school and how it made things a little bit tricky. But she's not saying they shouldn't be here. She's saying they'll be all right because we'll support them.
Okay, something that's also very important when your child starts school is to make sure they're socially and emotionally ready for school. A sign that your child might not be socially ready is they might have trouble with their social interactions with others, maybe managing frustrations, taking turns, learning to wait and sharing, all those little things you might notice with your child in social settings. Another thing is emotions. A lot of children have difficulties managing their emotions and frustrations, and they might get emotional over little things that happen, you know, dropping something on the floor or having to wait or not understanding an instruction. That can be another reason that your child may not be ready for school. And not to mention like separating from you. Separation anxiety can often be in children that are not quite emotionally ready for school as well. In my classroom at the moment I have a child who is quite young, and I notice already he has trouble following instructions. He has trouble with when he does something incorrect in his work, and he'll nearly go to tears. He's calling out to me across the classroom when he's not sure of something, and he'll get there, I know he will, with help and support, but I can already see, and he often says he's tired throughout the school day. So I think for him, school will be okay, he'll get there, but it's a little bit more difficult for him, and he often doesn't follow through with my instructions, like with our daily routines and procedures. He gets muddled up or he needs extra prompts, and that could be another reason that he's not quite ready for school.
So perhaps another year in early childhood or at home may have supported this little one, but there's no guarantees. And doing the same again will automatically ensure those skills and understandings are there. It's about having that relationship with centres and with schools to see what supports are there, how are we developing those types of behaviours so he will be better able to participate and learn. Oops. So There's lots of ways to practice social skills, and early childhood centres do this really well. Probably not so much the card games and the board games, but there's things that parents can do. iPad games like that for sharing, taking turns, for waiting, for winning and losing gracefully. Yeah, everyone's laughing because it's not a toddler trait, is it? It's not a preschooler trait. It's a win at all cost, and the meltdowns that happen. But infusing those little, mummy won that time, and sort of setting up that scenario because they're, role plays and stories are great ways into social skills. So role playing ways into a game through conversations with the teachers. Little ones might say, I need to take a piss. Well, no, let's role play how you're going to ask the teacher that. That happens a lot, doesn't it, ladies? You just... So you'd think they're simple things, but children can die of embarrassment if they've said something and everybody starts laughing because they're not attuned to what's expected. Empathy is a huge one, isn't it? Helping children to understand how other people might feel and how they might feel themselves. And books are a great way to do that. Not books that say, I'm going to teach empathy skills, but great storybooks that have wonderful characters that children can identify with are great starters into those conversations. Similarly, being assertive, teaching children, role-playing with children, how they can stand up for themselves and others in fair and respectful ways. So lots of talking and scenarios around that. Problem solving as well. There's a problem, let's talk about it. Let's role play and share how to analyse and resolve the problem in constructive ways. And then the problem might not be resolved, but you're teaching them a process of thinking socially. And modelling acts of kindness and helpfulness. And, we could go on, couldn't we? But it's important to support children in developing those skills, and they will continue to develop them, hopefully. And my question is, how do you as a school community embed social skills into the curriculum in the early days of school and beyond? That might sound a bit teacher talk, but schools are really good at talking about their academic, how they do wonderful things with academic skills, and rightly so, that's their core business. But we want to know how they support children to continue to develop socially, to be able to work in groups, to enjoy games on the playground, etc. I'm going to have a few slides of different perspectives, what's important. I said to you before that children mainly say what's important when they start school, friendships, knowing someone, having someone to play with, and also knowing the rules. Knowing the rules has come out quite a lot. When children understand what's expected, they feel comfortable. When they understand that routine, they're confident that they're not going to get into trouble, or things are a lot easier. Teachers tend to focus on social and emotional development, a bit like Sharon said. Let's get them ready to learn by being able to develop those skills of social skills within the classroom. Parents sometimes can focus on worry about academic preparedness. I guess that's why I want to allay your fears that it's not the most important thing. And friends. We want our children to have not sitting in the playground on their own. And early childhood educators, well, they just want to share because they know so much about those little people, and they want to make sure that the teachers find out about it so they can support them in developing and make connections to what they're good at and what they like to do. Here's Maddie. Maddie just had a happy start to school a few years back because she had it down. She knew the rules. She knew what the teacher wanted. The teacher told her that everything she did was about learning, and she could talk about that and understood exactly what she needed to do, which made for a happy start.
Hello, my name is Maddie, and I'm at Big School. And Big School is where you learn lots of stuff, and it's really good to be you can find your brother or sister or cousin.
She was also very social. Penny had a happy start to school as well. She liked to do a whole range of things. She was 5 in April, but didn't go to school to the next year. She was quite competent in a lot of ways. She had a fixation on the rules as well. Fascinating, isn't it?
My favourite things at school is sport and drawing, and I like to read and write and all stuff. The thing about school that I don't like is the rules. It's because you can't go some places are out of bounds, some things are illegal, no toys in the classroom. There's lots of rules that you can not even break. And no going outside the whole school. The advice that I would give is no breaking rules. Listen to what the teacher says. And there's one thing that the rule that lots of people break, but no detention. Wash your legs always. And lip seal, put your hands up. So there's my advice. Do that, please.
None of that was scripted. She came up with all that on her own. She was very excited to share that with me. Tiff's Penny's mum, and she has some tips, and she'll share with you about how she encouraged Penny to make friends.
So when Penny was starting school, something that my husband and I were worried about was the fact that she was starting the local primary school, but she wasn't moving into kindergarten with any friends from preschool. The children at the local preschool were going to different schools for different reasons. So we started talking to Penny about, the importance of chatting to people and introducing herself to make friends. And that was really hard for her, in those social settings. And so I was reflecting on how challenging that was for me. So something that I made a conscious effort to do was to introduce myself and to make friends with grown-ups when we'd be at the park as well. So I could show her that, while it initially felt scary, it was okay. So we worked on doing that together in the lead up. And she's actually quite good at making friends now. Most kids are, but I think that really supported her, because it is a big scary thing to say hello to someone new. And particularly this year now, she's transitioned from kindergarten to year 1. She's in with another whole new group of kids, and it hasn't really fazed her because she just tells us that she's friends with everyone. So I think that really supported her as she started school, making those social connections.
Thanks, Tiff. I'm going to try and speed up a little bit because I've got a bit more to go. Mary's little one, Ivy, was the 4th child in the family. Mary thought that Ivy was going to rock into school and everything would be fine, but she was a bit surprised that she is exhausted, almost like she's not coping. We didn't expect this, as she's very familiar with the school. It's not an unfamiliar environment. I think she's doing okay, but she's really exhausted and really badly behaved, which she's never been before. She's been such a beautiful, beautiful child all her life, and all of a sudden I'm putting it down to tiredness. So I think this might be a bit of a common scenario, and some of Kate's advice was to stop all the extracurricular afternoons on the weekends, have really quiet weekends for quite a while. Mary started coming into the classroom to help out, to really suss out what was going on with Ivy, because she was not a young child. She was confident, but she was having some issues. Kate here talks about how she solved some issues for Layla by building that relationship with the teacher. Let's have a little listen to that.
I made a real point to introduce myself without being too pushy, but sit down and talk to her about our personal situation at home, which had changed significantly in the lead up to the start of school. So I wanted her to be aware of that. in the sense that I knew she would be seeing, watching, you know, my daughter every day at school, and I wanted to know, you know, that she was okay, I guess, around her wellbeing, how she was settling in, because I wanted to know if anything that might be happening at home might impact her in the classroom or vice versa. So I felt that establishing that relationship up front was really important for me. And it did help, especially in relation to Layla's anxiety and settling into the playground. You know, we did have a lot of issues around that. And knowing her teacher, we actually set up a separate meeting after a bit of an email chain to say, look, you know, this is happening. She's coming home in tears, and I know she's crying at different breaks, and what can I do and what can the school do to help her with that? And her teacher was really good in dealing with that, and that changed.
We'll leave it there, but you've got the idea. It's that building that relationship with teachers is so important, and sharing that information. Nothing is too big that it can't be solved, and Kate did that really well. Ben is Kate's brother, and they have a little boy, Will, who was so ready for the change. He was 5 in the July, so he was very excited to go to school. He loves routine, one of those kids, so he was specially school suited him. He loved learning. He was very inquisitive, asked lots of questions. He really likes technical explanations, Ben told me. And he likes at school is just something for himself. He doesn't have to share it with his brother. Let's have a think about how play now supports all those preparedness skills for starting school. There's a lot of research on play, how it just shapes the architecture of the brain and supports children's development in many, many ways. I've got, actually before I show you the slides on it, I really liked this, that consistent longitudinal evidence tells us that children who have come from play-based preschools have better academic outcomes by the time they reach year 3 and beyond. So if sometimes you think, you know, why isn't my early childhood centre doing some school prep, putting in those worksheets and doing more with numbers and sounds, remember that that's not the best use of their time. It's nothing, you know, I'm not saying it's going to hurt them, but it's not the best use of their time. They'll get plenty of that later down the track. There's play prepares them in so many different ways, and I won't read all this, but intellectual skills, creative skills, and I think I must have just subconsciously made that one bigger, because we want children to be creative beings. We don't want them just to regurgitate facts, but we want them to be problem solvers and be divergent thinkers. So we've got to give them lots of open-ended experiences so we can find out what they know and can do. Cognitive skills, so particularly language and literacy skills have strong links to play, and social skills, of course, emotional competence and empathy. Increased feelings of well-being, because play is fun, and it's what childhood should be about, isn't it? Fun and laughter and games, and when there's learning in the boot, and of course physical health. Play, you don't see the learning. It's not as obvious as if you've written something or filled out something. So sometimes it's harder to see how it is developing these skills, but there is a lot of evidence to say, and in early childhood centres particularly, and teachers support children in that play. So they plan to scaffold and to prompt children during that play, whether it's for language, problem solving, not take it over, but support them. And that's something that I'm sure you do at home as well. The Department of Education is starting to get a little bit more enthusiastic about extending play into the early years. So there's been a bit of push back from early childhood, push up instead of push down, which is great. But there's still issues, isn't there, about accountability and curriculum and testing that is pressures, competing pressures. When you look at those two sorts of activities, I know what's going to develop the children in better ways. We're talking about how an important skill for starting school is oral language. So if your child isn't interested in learning that A says A or writing, that's okay. The best thing you can do is to provide lots of opportunities for speaking and listening in experiences through play and also through books. So reading for enjoyment, but also reading develops language, develops vocabulary and content knowledge. So lots of interactions with books, as I'm sure you know. I've got down there vocabulary tier 2 words. Tier 2 words are things that we talk about that children don't hear in everyday conversation, but they might get it from books or adult conversation. So thinking about those extra special words you can infuse into their vocabulary. And the book language, there's books, structures of language that you only get from books. Really set them up to understand and connect in with a range of books down the track when they get to school. Rhymes, lots of fun rhymes, just, you know, Dr. Seuss books, fabulous. Children enjoy just listening to the sounds and play with language, get them interested in the sounds of words without doing any formal activities if they're not interested. Of course, drawing, creating, experimenting and talking about what it is and communicating what it is that they're drawing or creating and being there to have those conversations and building on those language skills. So important. More finite skills here if your children are interested in. Teachers alike, if they can recognise their name, they might be interested in practising to write it or using their name to identify some of those beginning sounds. Noticing environmental print, maybe thinking about the shapes of those letters, talking about that, just getting them tuned into print in the environment or on a page that it actually carries a message. And of course lots of different ways to represent their thinking and communicate through pictures. I don't know if you've told your children when they go to school that they're going to learn to read. This is probably not unfamiliar.
Zoe was really excited about starting school because I'd told her that when she went to kindergarten she'd learn to read. So she reported after her very first day of kindergarten that it wasn't all it was cracked up to be. They hadn't actually taught her to read that day.
Yes, you have heard that one. And of course self-help skills, and you'll hear a lot more about that as your children move through this year and starting school, and that's just a snippet of things that you can start practising at home that the teachers really appreciate when children can come to school being able to be a bit more independent, caring of their stuff. So now we're thinking about that holding back debate and delaying. So as I said before, children are able to go to school right up until the 31st of July when they turn 5. We probably make a lot of decisions as parents about readiness linked to their age, and parents tend to, or we tend to keep children back from school if they don't turn 5 till, you know, that March, April, May, June, July, that kind of thing. We tend not to send them because perhaps they're not, you know, have those readiness skills. But my advice is to talk to the early childhood centres to look at the individual child's strengths and needs, but also to look at the needs of your family. Perhaps it's important for your family's well-being or financial situation, or you know, you've got triplets at home and you just got to get rid of one out of the mix. Like, whatever reason, it might be important that your child starts school, and they're entitled to. So the decision has to be made holistically, thinking about what's best for the children, but also for you as a family unit. There is some research that says that older children generally do a little bit better at first because they're older. They've had another year of getting to know what happens in the world. But generally that diminishes, as Lisa said earlier. Everyone kind of catches up and If you've got some of those social skills and physical skills, then, you know, perhaps being young, you will be sorted. So again, reasons from research where children are perhaps delayed start is because they're socially and emotionally not ready, because they may have some identified learning difficulties. Maybe they have some speech issues where it's been suggested that therapy would support them before they start school, or occupational therapy. I'm not suggesting this, I'm just saying this is what research has found. Research has found that people worry about potential issues, that mixing with older children much later in high school, there might be unusual peer pressure because they're younger. Some of the sorts of things and people worry about may be valid, but I think realistically we have to think about the little people, what's happening there at the time. There can be peer pressure at any age, I think. And your own experiences. Maybe you were young when you started school. Maybe you were older when you started school and you were too tall for everybody else. How our experiences will colour the reasons we believe we will. I think sometimes holding children back might be holding them back from new and wonderful experiences. So we really have to look closely, talk carefully with our early childhood teachers, get advice from the school teachers, looking at the support that we have as a family and that is being offered for our children when we're thinking about those decisions. This is a pretty basic approach. Don't assume just because they're young they'll have difficulty. Look at them individually, look at their strengths and their needs, and if your child is keen to go, they've got friends that are going, it suits the family to go, then they should go. That's a simplistic approach. There are some more things that you can consider. Is your child within the legal starting school age? Of course. Do they want to go to school? Are they interested? What do the early childhood teachers say? And what knowledge of your child and your family are they basing that advice on? Because you know your child best, you know your family best. So take advice, yes, they're good at, they're expert at what they do. But are they basing it on what they know about you as well? Same with school. Take their advice, they're expert at what they do. But are they basing it on you and your family's needs as well? So this is where this relationship becomes important. Do they have friends or acquaintances going to school? We know that's important. Are they, good at making friends? Has a reasonable two-way relationship between the family and the school being built, or is there potential? Do you get a sense that, this school is going to be able to listen to your needs and provide for what you want for your family? Will starting school make a positive difference to the family as well as the child? So again, we're looking at it holistically. It's not a checklist just of what the child can do or can't do. Do you have a sense that they'll feel comfortable in that school community? Sometimes you just got to go with what your gut is telling you. Is there support at the school that you intend to go to for families of culturally or linguistically diverse backgrounds or children with additional needs, if that's the support that your family needs? What provisions are there to support you? And how comfortable do you feel about educational ethos of the school? Many of you might be going to the local school and you're really happy with that. There's no decisions to be made, but you still want to have a think about how the school sits with your own expectations as well. And some of you might be thinking about decisions between different schools. I just want to play this last clip for you from Sharon again, who talks about some little boys that weren't ready, but they did so well that I wonder what would have happened if they had been held back?
Okay, last year I had 2 boys in my classroom that I was very concerned about, especially their literacy development and their ability to listen on the floor and acquire sound knowledge with spelling words. But as the year went on, it's like they just needed this settling period. They needed to take in what school life was about, and they ended up being my stronger writers and readers by the end of the year. It was like they just needed time to go at their own pace and absorb what school life was about, and they weren't misbehaving. It was like they just needed to take in what was the instruction and be ready for it, and when they were ready they just flew, and it was like they knew that little bit of growing up time. And I believe that all the early learning we did in literacy, as well as oral work and written work, it all came together for those boys, and that was really lovely to see.
Beautiful story. This is the summary of advice that you have, bit of encapsulating some of the things that we've talked about today. It's on your handout, pretty much word for word. And I just want to leave you with this thought. You may have heard of Loris Malaguzzi. He's from Reggio Emilia and responsible for that approach to early learning. And he believes that children have 100 worlds to discover, 100 worlds to invent, and 100 worlds to dream. Sometimes we stifle the capacity for surprise and wonder. So busy are we looking for signs of readiness, for what is predicted and what is required, that we miss the new, the unexpected, the evidence of children's great and unknowable potential. I love that quote. Thanks, everyone. Now, if you've got any questions, I'm sorry I did talk a little bit long, but I'm happy to answer any queries you might have, if I can.
Thank you. When you were talking about some of the things for readiness, one of them was a child's ability to separate from their family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know it wasn't a checklist, but I sort of go through it and I feel really comfortable about my daughter going to school next year. Except for that, you know, like, she still really struggles, and we've got a routine that she's been in for 2 years, and she still really struggles with that.
Yeah.
So just wondered what you could recommend in terms of cultivating the skills that might enable an easy transition, or I'm hoping that the new routine might eliminate it altogether, but I'm also anxious.
I think sometimes children's personalities are their personalities, aren't they? And I know my eldest son was like that very much. He cried every year for 3 years when he went to school, just that initial separation. And yeah, I wish I had some more suggestions for you about that. It sounds like you've been doing lots of things. And in the early childhood centre, they're still, even though they're very familiar with the people and the routines, the places. Yeah, so that's basically what supports that is, I guess, that familiarity of going to another caregiver who they feel attached to. Sorry. But maybe that's just her, and yeah. Yeah. I mean, some kids are just shy and quiet, and they don't want to be that. They don't want to put themselves out there, and no matter how long we keep them back, they could be 10, and they're still not going to be able to do that without issues. Yeah.
In terms of, thank you again, that was great. In terms of like getting to know the school in the year before, are those opportunities kind of set by the school, or is it? I know there's like an orientation program that invites like regular participation through in like the last 6 months of this year. But is it something we should be doing independently, or is it?
The question was, do the schools set set the times for you to come and get familiar with the environment? And generally they do. They have the set orientation, they have times for you to come and engage. Many schools now are having some early play learning where the children get to come more often and just play in the hall and get familiar with families outside of the school environment. But my advice, if you would like to go more, approach the school and go to the office and talk to the school leaders and find out about what the opportunities are there for you, because you should be able to go into that school, have a look around, make an appointment to talk to the principal, appointment to catch up with the kinder teachers when they've got time, so they can share some of the things about school and make some time for you to, take your children there to have a look and become more familiar if you feel that that's needed. Yeah, definitely. I hope I've given you I'm sure I've given you some things to think about and to ponder, and some things you may agree with and disagree with, and that's perfectly fine. It's just lots of things to consider and think about, and every child's different, every family is different and unique, and you're the one that has to do what you think's best for your little ones. So good luck and thanks for coming tonight.